I realize that some of you are a little bit concerned about the upcoming sentence diagramming exam. So to help you out, I have a few tips that I've provided on this video for you. The biggest tip that I can give you is you have got to study your parts of speech. That's the difficulty you're having with sentence diagramming. If you don't know what the part of speech is, then how do you know where to place it on a diagram? The other thing that I'd like for you to remember is that the posters are on the wall in my classroom that you can reference at any time. Those posters are also available on my website. So learn your parts of speech, then you can figure out the diagram. At that point, it's just putting together the puzzle. So as we prepare to practice our sentence diagramming, you need to know the parts of speech. That's a pretty big one. And you need to know the difference between a phrase and a clause. A phrase can have nouns, it can have verbals, but it's not going to have a related subject and a verb, two that go together. A clause may have a related subject and a verb, but it may not necessarily be a complete thought. That's why we have independent clauses and dependent clauses. So I have a couple of sentences that I'm going to give you that we're going to practice with today. I'm going to take you through these sentences, identifying the different parts of speech and the role of the different words in the sentence, and then I'll show you the sample diagrams. So I'd like for you to begin by getting a piece of paper out. I'm going to show you the color scheme that I use when I diagram and I identify the parts of speech. I think that's a good habit for you to use as well if you're not really confident. In particular, notice that I use red for the subject and predicate nominatives. I use blue for the predicate verbs and verb phrases. Sentence 1, the Batman franchise has always been enormously popular. Go ahead and write that down. Start with what you know. Look at the sentence that you have. The Batman franchise has always been enormously popular. And what you need to look for is your subject and your verb. So I have a red marker, I have a blue marker. I'm going to go through and I am going to find my subject and my simple predicate. So take your marker, and what is this sentence about? The Batman franchise has always been popular. At its most basic, it's about the franchise. So that is my subject. So I'm going to mark that with red. And then the franchise, what? What's my verb or my verb phrase? Well, it has been. So instead of just having a plain old verb, I have a verb phrase, has been. Okay? Now, in my sentence, I'm going to take my black marker and I'm going to draw a line to separate the subject and the predicate in my sentence. Okay? So all of this stuff is going to be related to my subject. Everything after this line is going to be related to my predicate. Now I'm going to try and place the rest of the words. So if you'll remember, I use green for modifiers. Those are adjectives and adverbs. So what kind of franchise is it? Well, it's the franchise. And it's the Batman franchise. So I'm going to mark those with green. Has always been enormously popular. Has been, what modifies that? Always does. So I'm going to mark always in green. Okay. And then what about popular? Popular describes how the franchise has been. And since it's in the predicate and it is describing, it is going to be called a predicate adjective. So I'm going to mark that one in red. Okay? So now I have to figure out enormously. Enormously is modifying an adjective. So that's going to make it an adverb. Okay, so this is what I'm going to end up with. The Batman franchise has always been enormously popular. You might want to pause right here if you didn't get this on your own, just to figure everything out and make sure that you have the individual parts. Okay, now let's talk about how we want to diagram our sentence about the Batman franchise and its enormous popularity. We're going to start always with the most basic part of the diagram. Start with what you know and build from there. There's no reason to start with the most complex part of the sentence first. So what I'm going to do is start out by drawing the basic part of my diagram. So my subject's going to go on this side, my predicate's going to go on that side. If you will recall, once we have this basic framework, we're going to basically take this model and just translate it over. So I'm going to take my simple subject and my simple predicate, and I'm going to record those onto this piece of paper. Make sure that you capitalize things exactly as they appear in your sentence. So I'm going to start by placing the word franchise, and then my simple predicate has been. So the beginning of my diagram is going to look like this. The franchise has been. Then I like to finish out one side at a time. So I'm going to place my two modifiers for the franchise, the and Batman. So if you remember, those go underneath the word that they modify. So we're going to draw two slanted lines just like I've done here, and we're going to capitalize the words just as exactly as they appear in the sentence. So I'm going to have the and Batman underneath franchise, just like so. So I've got the Batman franchise, and then for has been, if you'll recall, we had a modifier for has been, so I'm going to place that underneath. And again, I'm going to use green because it's a modifier. I'm going to write always. Okay, so got you up to this step. Now, if you'll remember, predicate nominatives and predicate adjectives don't go underneath the line, they go above it. But we're going to use a slanted line to indicate that it's renaming or describing the subject. So I'm going to use red again to indicate that it's related to the subject. Alright, so now I have the Batman franchise has always been popular. How popular has it been? Again, I'm going to put my modifier underneath the word that it modifies. I'm going to use green to do that, and it is going to be enormously popular. Okay, so your final diagram is going to look like this. The Batman franchise is my simple subject, has always been enormously popular. Alright, pause it if you need to, rewind if you need to, go back and figure it out. Sentence 2. The story of Batman is one that appeals to many ages. Okay, so I chose this particular sentence because it's more difficult, and it's going to give you a little bit more of a challenge to try and figure out what things are doing and what their role is in this sentence. However, we're still going to start with our basics. So what's my subject? What's my predicate? So I'm going to take my red marker, just like I did before. What is this sentence about? The story of Batman is one that appeals to many ages. My simple subject is story. Alright. My simple predicate is one of those state of being verbs. Is. Okay, so I'm going to mark that. And now my basic diagram is going to start with story is. Okay, now to figure out some of the other things that are going on here, first of all, like I said, you're going to have to know your parts of speech. You're going to have to know what a phrase is. You're going to have to know what a clause is. If you don't know those things, this sentence is going to be really, really hard for you. But let's work through it. Alright, let's start with the word the. The story of Batman. Well, the modifies story. So I'm going to take my green marker and I'm going to mark that as an adjective. So I have the story. Now, do you remember what of does? The story of Batman. Of is going to be orange because of is a preposition. So if you'll remember, prepositions are used to show relationship of words to other parts of the sentence. So the story of Batman is a prepositional phrase. So Batman is going to be what's called the object of that prepositional phrase. So I'm going to mark Batman with an OP. Okay, so you see Batman there. Now, the story of Batman is one. One is another name for the story. So that's a predicate nominative. Again, I'm going to mark that with red. Okay, so I have my predicate nominative. And you see the basic part that I've gotten here. Now, we're going to hold off on that appeals to many ages for just a second. If you'll remember before, I separated my subject and my predicate with a black line, so I'm going to do that right now. So I have the story of Batman is one that appeals to many ages. So when you go to diagram this basic part, you're going to start off by drawing your baseline and your center line. And I will have story, and then my verb is, and I will place my predicate nominative, one, and then I will have the word the, okay, so I'm going to show you that part first. I have the story is one. Now, my prepositional phrase of Batman, what does that modify? It modifies story. So it's going to go underneath story. So I'm going to use orange for my preposition and have of Batman. Okay. So I have the story of Batman is one. Now, remember how I told you that you needed to know your phrases and clauses and that would help you out? That appeals to many ages. Do we have a verb here? Sure do. Appeals. That is a relative pronoun. So I have a pronoun and a verb. This is basically functioning as a subject and a predicate. Okay? So what I have here is a relative clause. That's what it's called, a relative clause. And I will write that down for you so you can see it. This is a relative clause. It relates something to another part of the sentence. You see relative clause. Okay, so let's talk about our relative clause. The word that is a relative pronoun. It's my object of that clause. Appeals is my verb. Now, when I'm going through and I'm diagramming, and I have this is my basic sentence and this relative clause that attaches, the way that I'm going to diagram that is I'm going to drop a dotted line down from 1. Okay. And then I'm going to make another diagram underneath that, just like this here. Okay, so I'm going to draw my dotted line down in my new diagram, and I'm going to start off by placing that and appeals. Okay. So this is how my diagram looks at the moment. I think I'll add another little dotted line just to make that a little bit more clear that it's connected. But I have the story of Batman is one that appeals. Now, too many ages. What are we going to do with too many ages? What is the role that that plays in this sentence? Take a second and think about that. Too many ages. Had a second to think about it? Okay then. Too many ages is another prepositional phrase. Okay? So, too is my preposition. Ages is the object of that prepositional phrase. So it's the object of the preposition. And many is a modifier for ages. Okay, so this is how my sheet looks now. The story of Batman is one that appeals to many ages. Okay, so now I'm going to take my diagram and I'm going to need to add the prepositional phrase to many ages. So I'm going to draw that out. Start off with my preposition, to, my adjective, alright, and the final answer. The story of Batman is one that appeals to many ages. So you got that? Now, understand that I'm not going to give you one this complicated on the test. I basically did this to show you that it's more than just knowing, well, gee, preposition goes on a slanted line and this goes on that line. If you can't look at the sentence and tease out what the individual things in the sentence are doing, how are you going to be able to do this? This is the hard part. This, you can look at the poster on my wall and figure this part out pretty easily. This is the difficult part, and this is the part that I'm concerned that you learn. So if this is something that you're having difficulty with, the primary thing that you need to start figuring out, your subject of your sentence is always going to be a noun or a pronoun. Verbs and verb phrases are other things that you probably already know. Adjectives and adverbs, modifiers are easy. I have a cup. It's a black cup. It's a cold cup. These things describe the cup. I have a straw in that cup. I use the straw to drink. What do all of those words and phrases do in the sentence? Prepositions, for some reason, are difficult. And I think it's because so many of you have this conception that the only thing that a preposition is a location word, anywhere a mouse can go. But prepositions show relationship of words, phrases, and clauses to other words, phrases, and clauses in the sentence. Alright, the last one that I'm going to do in this particular practice video with you is a question. So take a second to write down this question and see if you can figure it out. The last sentence that I've chosen to give you is a question. Did you go to see the latest film? Now this one is kind of tricky. If you remember what I told you in class, we have to kind of flip questions around a little bit to diagram them. So let's start out by identifying our subject. Who's doing the action in this sentence? Did you go to see the latest film? Well, our action is being performed by you. So what did you do? Remember, we're going to turn our verb into a verb phrase. And what I'm going to have there is you did go to see the latest film. So let's start by diagramming just that part. You did go to see the latest film. So I'm going to draw my center line and my baseline. I'm going to write the word you, and it's going to be lowercase. I'm going to write the word did, and it's going to be capitalized so that I know that it's a question. Okay, so it's going to look like this. You did go. Okay, now, you did go what? Well, if you remember, anything that answers the question whom or what after the verb, that is acting as a direct object, which is going to be pink if it's a direct object. But I'm also going to mark this with purple because it's not just a direct object. If you'll recall, this is a verbal. It's an infinitive. Okay? To plus a verb is an infinitive. Okay? So I have, did you go to see? And then see is a verb. So I'm going to ask you again, see what? And here we're going to have another direct object. The direct object of the verb see is film. And that means the words the and latest are modifiers of that. So I'm going to have, did you go to see the latest film? Okay. So the diagram for this, I'm going to make my line, and notice that it doesn't go all the way down. You see that? That's where I'm going to put my infinitive. I have to put the infinitive up off the baseline. Okay. So I'm going to place it here. And I'm going to write to see. Okay. So you did go to see. And what did I go see? I went to go see, and this is pink. I know it's kind of hard to tell the difference in the pink and the red here. I have you did go to see film, and then I'm going to finish that out by adding my adjectives. The and latest. And my final diagram is going to look like this. Did you go to see the latest film? Okay. Now, your test is on Friday. I have prepared the study guide for you. I want you to practice the sentences on the study guide, and I want you to study those specific sentences for now. Understand that I'm not going to throw any tricks at you. Those are the sentences that are going to be on your test. Okay? So you need to study those and get confident with those. Now, are we going to be finished with this? No, it's not that easy. But if you can take those sentences and go through this same basic process to take it from diagram to sentence and from sentence to diagram, then I think you'll be all right. Just keep in mind that I'm going to grade you both on your ability to do this part and this part. You'll have the posters up on the wall to do this part, This part, you're not going to have help with. You're just going to have to know. As always, if you need help, come in and see me before school. I'm in my classroom usually by 7 a.m. And I'm usually in the classroom after school until 3:15. Come see me. I will help you work through your practice sentences.